He's Henry Gomez, an advertising agency strategist with 25 years of experience.
And he's Howard Eibach, a former copywriter and creative director and the author of 2 books on the creative brief. And together, we're the Brief Brothers, having an ongoing discussion about creative briefs, briefing, and advertising. Well, Howard, we were talking offline, and I think we were really thinking about the brief writer and what happens when the brief writer faces disagreement or resistance to the brief he or she has written. And I think it's a fertile topic because it's not always smooth sailing, right? It's not like everybody looks at the brief like the 10 Commandments come down on tablets and acknowledge it as the way to go forward. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I'm taking a slightly different perspective from you because you and I have disagreed about the role of collaboration on a brief. I acknowledge and understand that you've been trained to write a brief, so you would write it yourself, although you're not doing it in isolation because you're talking to people, you're doing research. But from my perspective, training for the ANA, I'm often working with marketers and brand people who don't have someone like you on their staff, an account planner or a strategist. So the role of writing the brief kind of falls onto one person's shoulders, and I encourage them not to take on that responsibility themselves. So there's more of a group effort, a collaborative effort. But that's a great opportunity. That's a great environment in which to have disagreement. And my impetus for this topic, which we talked about before we started taping, was just because we have consensus on a brief doesn't mean there's harmony. It can often mean there's just, yeah, okay, fine, it's apathy. And that can be highly dangerous for something as important as a creative brief. You don't want apathy. You're staking a position when you write a creative brief, which means you're attracting people who might disagree. You want people to disagree. Now, I'm looking at this from an educator's point of view, more of a theoretical, and your experience is in the day-to-day, actual, boots on the ground, writing the brief, battling it out with the creatives. So my perspective is different, but I think we share the same opinion that it's necessary to have that grinding of ideas to get to the best one.
So I think the resistance you will face on a brief as a brief writer, especially in an agency environment, is probably inversely proportional to how inspiring the brief is, right? So the more inspiring it is, the more likely it is provocative, and it's going to generate some degree of resistance. Now, collaboration, I do believe in collaborating with the creative department on the brief. I'm never going to bring them a brief that they haven't already, the creative director or somebody who he's assigned to be his lieutenant for the assignment hasn't signed off on the strategy and the brief. If they don't agree with that brief, then that can't be my brief. Like they have to buy in. Now, sometimes what happens is I've got creatives that have bought in, and then we take it to the account team because the account team wants to see it before we show it to the client because that's their job to be nervous Nellies, understandably, and I don't take away from what their role is. Right. But if I'm the strategist and I've looked at it and I said, this is the solution, or at least strategically the solution, and the creatives agree with me, then I'm going to override account service and I'm going to present that brief to the client. Mm-hmm. So, disagreement, if the creatives disagree, I have to go back to the drawing board and find a way that they will agree. If account team disagrees, generally I'm going to try to override them. And there's a political or a politics, aspect here, like how much leverage do I have? And does the creative department have versus how much leverage does the account team have? And that's different for every account in every agency, right?
Right.
So there's that. And then when you get to the client, you may face resistance as well. And part of this, is salesmanship. Can you articulate we got from A to B to C and all the way to Z, and that's what you're seeing in this brief. And did they follow along and not get lost along the way? And did they agree with everything along the way? So that's just kind of a good salesmanship. But yeah, you're going to face resistance at times, and that's okay. One of the things that I try to preach to the people that I mentor is humility. We can't believe that we're the only ones that have the solution. The creatives, when they challenge you, particularly when they're good creatives, they're also strategic thinkers.
Right.
And so they might challenge you on something, and you've got to be prepared to say, oh, I hadn't thought about it that way, or that's interesting. Let me think about it a little more. And so it can definitely be additive. I've had situations where I took my best thinking to a client, and the client rejected the brief and gave some feedback. And I went back to the drawing board with the feedback from the client. And when I came back the next time, I had a better brief. And I will say it was a better brief than the first one I took to him. Sometimes it's the genius of the client, and sometimes it's just, it bought me more time to think about the problem. And I was just able to come up with a better solution on the second round than on the first round. So you have to be humble in that regard, I think.
Oh, I agree. We agree on that one 100%. So good stuff, Henry.
Thank you, Howard. Okay, Howard. So today for our creative review, we're going to look at a short film made by a Portuguese agency. I hope I'm pronouncing it right. Og or Auge. And it is for a client called Translated. And let's roll it real quick so everybody knows what we're talking about.
Tieni, prenditi il biscottino, tieni. Di papà?
Daddy.
Come Daddy?
Di mamma?
Nanai.
Nanai. E che vuol dire nanai, scusa?
Puoi dirmi come si dice questo in francese?
Maison.
E questo qui in russo?
Riba.
Ma avete parenti stranieri?
Dimmi, quante lingue sai?
Tutte.
Tutte. Anche il greco?
Sì.
Che apopoti serii sono savsessis grosses?
Apamicri.
Lara, non si capisce niente. Puoi tradurre per me la signora?
Hello ladies, the special of the day is Aunt Carmela's eggplant parmigiana.
We'll take it. Okay, sounds good.
Ripeti dopo di me. Welcome.
Oh, welcome.
Willkommen.
Willkommen.
Bienvenidos. Ham Yong Hanida.
Wang Yong and Lara, io non ci riesco, non sono mica come te.
Dermi, ora chiedo, cosa ha detto? Ha una... Si chiede se ha qualcosa per sedersi. Sedersi, ma è venuto per lavorare.
Lara!
Das ist Start. Das ist Geschwindigkeit.
Koma ko siku ba ma gata. Kina ka woge woge na moto.
Che succede?
È arrivata. Lara, puoi spiegarmi quello che stanno dicendo?
C'è qualcuno fuori, sarà per te. Buonasera.
Ciao Lara. Ciao.
Chi è il primo?
All right, Howard. So what are your thoughts on this short film?
Well, in a phrase, I loved it. And I would say to the new and shiny brigade who likes to denigrate things that are not new and shiny anymore, especially when it comes to the whole concept of storytelling, I say this is a great example of storytelling, even though there are those out there who just don't like the idea because it's no longer new and shiny anymore. Well, I'm an old school guy. Storytelling is as old as human civilization, and this is a great example of telling a story. They've got 2.5 minutes. They took advantage of following this young girl from the time she was, 5 or 6 years old until she's a young lady, and she evolves in her skills as a translator, as a speaker of multiple languages. What I love about this is it's a highly technical and digital product, but the story is all analog. It's just old-fashioned people solving people's problems, and she's doing it so well. So I love it as a creative. I love it because it tells a story, and it tells a story well. And you know what? I don't always have the patience to sit through Subtitles, this one captured my attention, and I was happy to watch the whole thing from beginning to end. It was really well done.
Absolutely. So a couple points that you made, and I'm going to reiterate on one of them, is short form versus long form, right? So we're told that people's attention spans are short. You got to get them in the first 5 seconds, all this bull crap. You know what? If you have something compelling, people will watch. And I think what makes this compelling is a lot of it has to do with how it was made. You could tell it was very well cared for and made. The production value. It has a little bit of a feeling of a European cinema, right? Like these movies like Cinema Paradiso, right? These long films that are just made with this loving touch, and that has a story that you just immediately want to know how it turns out. There's humor to it, you know. I like that scene where the Russian couple, I think they're Russian or German, they come up with the exercise treadmill and they don't know how to use it, so she has to translate the instructions. So it's kind of like, it's very human in that sense. We can all relate to, like, not necessarily understanding an instructions. You know, we get these Chinese instructions with our things all the time, right? Or poorly translated English instructions. But the other thing that I thought was interesting about it was the tagline at the end, you know, translations with a human touch. So I dug a little bit more into this company, and they do, you know, translations for all these, I think they said 184 languages, but it's not Google Translate where you just type in words and it spits something back at you. You submit the documents online, but somebody is actually doing that translation. Now, they may have some computer aiding them to do the bulk of it, but the promise of the brand is that these are real humans, that you're going to get a accurately translated, which is important. Right. And the other brilliant thing I thought about it was, well, you know, you do this long film and it's like, well, who are the clients or who are the customers for these people? And immediately working in a multicultural ad agency and working in an agency that has worked with Latin America before, I thought, well, ad agencies would be one big possible customer and for this. So being in communicate, creating something for the audience of creatives that's going to get shared by creators and by agency people, I think is pretty brilliant, because probably agency people will have a lot of use for this brand. And I had never heard of Translated before. I mean, I've used translation firms, you know, along my whole career. A lot of times you need to get verified legal translations back into English of the Spanish stuff we create. So we have translators that out of house that will give us affidavits to say that it was accurately translated and so forth. So it's a very niche audience, but it's an audience that's kind of connected to the creative world in a way. And there's probably other applications for this service, but that was one that occurred to me. And let's not forget, the music was charming, straight out of Godfather. You know, it made me smile. It drew me in as well. It was really good stuff. It was a great spot. Good stuff, Henry. He's Howard Eibach. And he's Henry Gomez. And together, we're the Brief Brothers. See you next time. Next time.